The interior space of the first-class cabin on that international flight, the overnight journey from Los Angeles Airport, LAX, to John F. Kennedy Airport, JFK in New York, exuded an incredible luxury and tranquility. Warm light from crystal ceiling lamps shone down, reflecting sparklingly on glossy surfaces, mingling with the gentle aroma of espresso coffee and the faint scent of jasmine in the air. Passengers were all enjoying comfort, premium leather seats, modern personal entertainment screens, and attentive service to every small detail. Inside this cabin were two twin girls, Madison and Chloe. They were not yet 12 years old, but their eyes showed a confidence and maturity beyond their age. Their pristine white dresses and flowing curly hair could not hide the gentle yet strong beauty from within. These children had been accustomed to luxurious conditions since birth, nurtured in an environment that their father, Michael Carter, had built with sweat and tears. Michael Carter, a middle-aged man with a sturdy build and sharp eyes, sat right beside his daughters. He was a renowned businessman, a former Olympic gold medalist, a symbol of determination and an unyielding will. Michael understood that everything he had today was the result of years of hard training and fighting social prejudices. And what he valued most were his daughters, the greatest pride of his life. However, the peace of that night flight was shattered when a cold and decisive voice rang out from the rear of the cabin. "Listen here, you two girls, but you can't sit here. This is the first-class cabin, reserved exclusively for priority passengers. First class is not for colored children like you. You are just a system error, not real customers worthy of this place." The flight attendant, dressed in a formal uniform, looked directly at Madison and Chloe with a challenging gaze. The two children, surprised and confused, exchanged astonished looks. "We were assigned these seats, ma'am," Madison said quietly, trying to keep calm. The attendant sneered, her eyes full of sarcasm as if to extinguish all hope. "Assigned? Who gave permission? I'm not obliged to indulge the whims of some kids who think they have rights here. These seats are not for mixed race or black children." Chloe snapped back, her voice filled with resentment. "We are not mixed race, and we deserve respect." The attendant shrugged indifferently, her tone repeating an unchanging truth. "Deserve? Look at you, not knowing manners, but daring to demand. Don't forget, this place is for those with money and status, not for unruly colored kids." Michael Carter now stood up abruptly, his voice thunderous in the cabin. "You have no right to insult my children with such vulgar and racist words. I will not allow you to disgrace my family's honor." The flight attendant turned to the other passengers, raising her voice as if wanting to expose her prejudice for the entire cabin to hear. "This is not racism. It is an undeniable fact. These kids don't belong here. They are just a burden on our flight." Some distant passengers nodded, their eyes cold, distant, and full of prejudice, making the atmosphere even more suffocating and tense. Madison hugged Chloe tightly, silent tears flowing down her cheeks. But in the eyes of the two girls still burned a flame of determination not to submit, despite being treated with cruel injustice. The atmosphere inside the first-class cabin had become suffocating and unbearably tense. All eyes were focused on Michael Carter and his two young daughters, who had become the center of a dispute that was not merely about airplane seats, but about deep-seated social prejudices affecting people on a personal level. The flight attendant stood upright in her neat uniform, her gaze cold and voice challenging. "Mr. Carter, I have made it clear. This is not about your family, but the airline's regulations. And these children, even if they are yours, have no right to occupy the seats meant for genuine first-class passengers." Michael stepped forward, his voice booming like thunder through the cabin. "Who wrote those rules? And why is it that a colored child like mine is not allowed to sit with his family on a flight he paid for? Do you realize this is blatant discrimination?" The attendant smirked with disdain. "You're making a fuss over something trivial. To me, it's not trivial at all. Colored children like these often cause trouble, and don't be surprised if they don't know how to behave in a place as upscale as this." Chloe, her voice trembling but firm, replied, "We are not troublemakers. We just want to sit with our father on the flight." The attendant jerked her head, her tone dripping with contempt. "Oh, excuse me, I forgot. For you, sitting with your father doesn't mean deserving. This world is not meant for people like you." Madison began to cry, tears streaming down her cheeks while Michael clenched his fists, his face flushed with anger. He knew this was not just about seats, but a fight against a system of prejudice and injustice his family had faced many times before. "You must stop immediately," Michael said, his voice roaring. "My children are not objects for you to trample on with such racist words. If you can't realize that, you don't deserve to work in the airline service industry." Some passengers began whispering, some showed disapproval of the attendant's attitude, but most kept their distance, afraid to get involved. Some even turned their faces away, as if wanting to avoid witnessing the painful truth unfolding right before their eyes. Captain Roberts, who had been standing at the far end, now stepped into the cabin with a tense and somewhat reluctant expression. He tried to calm the situation with a measured tone. "Mr. Carter, allow me to clarify. We have strict policies regarding first-class seating allocation to ensure the safety and comfort of all passengers." Michael looked directly into the captain's eyes, his voice icy cold. "Safety? Comfort? Or is it discrimination and prejudice? Can you explain why my innocent children, who have valid reservations, are being forced out simply because of their skin color?" Captain Roberts hesitated, unable to give a convincing answer. He knew well that behind those policies lay bias and discrimination the airline did not want exposed. The attendant continued, "Mr. Carter, I'm not the one who makes these rules, but I must follow them. Colored children like these don't fit in first class. They often bother others, and we don't want trouble." A middle-aged passenger nearby, dressed in a sharp suit, spoke up. "It's hard to believe that in the 21st century, there are still people who think this way. It's a shame for the airline." Tensions rose further as these openly racist words were spoken right in the middle of the airplane cabin. Michael felt his blood boil, but he still tried to remain calm, standing firm beside his daughters. "We are not just talking about airplane seats," Michael said, "but about fairness and human dignity. Without justice, money and status mean nothing." Whispers spread throughout the cabin. Some passengers began leaving their seats, creating space as if allowing this debate to unfold more freely. Madison and Chloe looked at their father, their eyes filled with intertwined faith and fear. They had never stood up against prejudice like this before, but this time, with their father's steadfast support, they felt they were not alone. The story was far from over. It was just beginning. A battle Michael Carter and his family would face not only on this flight, but throughout the long journey of life ahead. The atmosphere in the first-class cabin had gradually descended into chaos. Harsh, offensive, and racist words made many passengers uncomfortable and distracted. But alongside them were also some sympathetic and silently supportive glances directed toward Michael Carter's family. Just as Michael was about to speak again, a man in a flight attendant supervisor uniform entered the cabin with a serious expression. She was Mrs. Collins, the flight supervisor, the authority responsible for handling issues arising on the plane. "Mr. Carter, I am Mrs. Collins, the flight supervisor today," she said calmly but sharply, trying to control the situation. "Let's stay calm and resolve this matter reasonably." Michael turned to Mrs. Collins, his voice still powerful. "I'm not looking for excuses or empty apologies, Mrs. Collins. I want my children's rights guaranteed. They do not deserve to be treated like inferior beings." Mrs. Collins frowned slightly and responded cautiously. "This is not a matter of racism, sir. The airline's policy is designed to ensure safety and comfort for all passengers. If an incident occurs, we must handle it according to regulations." Michael was unyielding. That policy might be an excuse to cover up prejudice. "Do you think forcing colored children to leave their seats for safety reasons is reasonable? I have flown many times with my family and never encountered this." The flight attendant had now stepped back, her face tense and clearly worried. The tension between Michael and the crew had escalated to a climax. At that moment, Captain Roberts entered the cabin, his face showing fatigue and pressure. He tried to cool the situation down. "Mr. Carter, ladies and gentlemen," he said, "I understand your dissatisfaction, but the airline has clear policies about seat allocation. We do not want any incidents during the flight." Michael snapped back. "Which side are you on? Racism or fairness?" My children were forced to leave their seats simply because of their skin color. That's not an incident. It's blatant discrimination. A few passengers started whispering and looking at each other. Their expressions showed weariness or disapproval of the crew's attitude. Some older passengers whispered to each other that this was an age-old story they had witnessed too many times. A young female passenger stood up and spoke decisively. "I am white, but I find this completely unacceptable. The airline should apologize to your family and let the children sit where they were assigned." This statement briefly eased the tension in the cabin. However, some reacted negatively, such as a middle-aged man with a displeased face. "We cannot just let anyone sit wherever they want. Those are the rules. If you don't like it, you can fly with another airline." The debate grew heated. Michael stood firm, speaking with determination. "I don't care what anyone says. I only know that my daughters deserve respect and protection. I will not allow this discrimination to continue in their lives." The flight attendant returned, her voice sharp. "Mr. Carter, if you do not cooperate, we will have to ask you and your children to leave the flight." That statement hit Michael and his family like a strong blow. The seriousness of the situation silenced the cabin so much that the heavy breaths of those involved could be heard. Michael looked straight at his children, his eyes full of pain but also a vow. "We are not going anywhere. This is our flight, and I will protect my children to the end." The girls looked at their father, feeling the strength and determination radiating from him. Madison wiped her tears. Chloe squeezed her sister's hand, and together they prepared to face the next challenge. The atmosphere in the first-class cabin had become denser than ever before. All eyes were fixed on Michael Carter and his family, a family caught in the whirlwind of injustice and prejudice. The racist words, though never officially spoken before, were now like sharp knives exposed to the light. Michael, with an uncompromising voice, began to speak under the attention of everyone. "You may call this policy, regulation, safety, or comfort, but in reality, it is an invisible wall erected to separate us, the people of color, from what you consider privileges. My daughters do not deserve to be treated as inferiors simply because of their skin color." A few passengers gently applauded, some others stared with displeasure, but Michael paid no attention to those looks. He continued, his voice fanning the flames of justice. "These girls are not objects to be mocked or sacrifices for discrimination and prejudice. They are human beings, children worthy of respect and fair treatment." The flight attendant, with a tense expression, tried to interrupt. "Mr. Carter, I'm only following the airline's regulations." Michael cut in coldly. "Airline regulations or rules of prejudice? Who decided that a child of color doesn't deserve to sit here? Your power does not give you the right to impose discrimination on others." An elderly passenger, speaking with shock, said, "I have witnessed too many such acts of discrimination in my life, and it is heartbreaking that it still exists here, on a flight in the 21st century." Those words sounded like a wake-up call, causing some passengers to begin re-examining their attitudes and thoughts. A few smiled in support. Even some stood up and said, "I am white, and I cannot accept this. Let the children sit where they were assigned." But not everyone agreed. Some other passengers with sarcastic tones responded, "This is our flight, not a place for those who don't understand things to speak up." The clear division in the cabin reflected a society full of conflicts about race and rights. Michael looked around, feeling the pressure, but also seeing glimmers of hope in sympathetic glances. Captain Roberts, though trying to maintain a neutral stance, could not avoid being put in a difficult position. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are committed to ensuring safety and comfort for everyone. However, I will record all opinions to report to the airline." Michael emphasized, "Safety cannot be an excuse for discrimination and prejudice. If the airline does not change, we will fight to the end." Madison, with a soft but determined voice, spoke up. "We just want to be treated like other children. We don't deserve to be looked down on just because of our skin color." Those words silenced the entire cabin. Everyone looked at the two girls with a different gaze, somewhat moved and sympathetic. This debate was not only about a flight, but about fairness, dignity, and deeper human values than ever before. The plane finally landed amid the heavy silence of the first-class cabin. The Michael Carter family stood up, walking down the aisle with eyes filled with mixed emotions. anger, exhaustion, and a slight relief from having upheld their dignity. Immediately, airline representatives and security personnel awaited to handle the incident. Michael received an official apology from the airline's communications director. Before the cameras and press reporters, the airline's representative stated, "We sincerely apologize for the incident that occurred on Flight XXX. The airline has zero tolerance for any acts of racial discrimination and commits to conducting a serious investigation. We will ensure that those involved will be held fully accountable." Michael's heart ached. The apology could soothe public anger, but it could not erase the deep wounds his children had suffered. Meanwhile, Madison whispered to Chloe, "Do you think they really understand, Chloe? Or is it just an apology to get past this?" Chloe held her sister's hand, trying to stay calm. "We can't know, but I think we have to be even stronger." Michael looked at his daughters, his heart squeezed by worry. He knew psychological wounds could not be healed by mere apologies. He stepped beside his children, his voice warm but full of determination. "I know this is very hard for you, but I am proud that you have been so resilient. We will not stop here." A reporter asked with a challenging tone, "Mr. Carter, does your family intend to sue the airline for this racial discrimination?" Michael calmly replied, "We are considering all options to protect our family's rights and dignity. The most important thing is to ensure this does not happen to anyone else." Meanwhile, Captain Roberts and the flight attendant were suspended pending investigation. They made no public statements, but their silence was a testimony to the serious consequences of their actions and words. As for the flight attendant, she could not hide her anxiety upon learning she would face severe disciplinary measures. She sat quietly in the crew restroom, her eyes vague as if realizing the consequences of the words she had used. Michael passed through the baggage claim area, his eyes inadvertently catching curious looks, scrutinizing glances, and even sympathy from some other passengers. Some bowed their heads quietly, others tried to offer reassuring smiles to the children. A middle-aged passenger approached and quietly said to Michael, "I'm truly sorry for not speaking up sooner. You and your family have been very brave." Michael responded with a forced smile. "Thank you. We don't want pity, only respect." As the Carter family left the airport, they knew the real battle was just beginning. Racial discrimination was not something to be solved in a day, but with unity and strength from these experiences, they hoped to create change. At home, Madison and Chloe still felt confused and anxious. Every time they mentioned the flight, their eyes showed fear mixed with an indescribable resentment. Chloe asked her father, "Daddy, why do they hate me because of my skin color?" Michael knelt down, looking straight into his children's eyes. "I don't fully understand either, but I know we will not let that hurt you. Remember, you always deserve to be loved and respected." The next day, social media was flooded with posts and comments about the incident. People discussed and condemned it, but there were also many discriminatory and prejudiced remarks. Michael read each line, each message, his heart aching like salt rubbed into a wound. He knew that building a fairer society required more than apologies and formal investigations. He began planning a campaign to raise awareness about racial discrimination, starting from his own community. After all that had happened, the Michael Carter family began entering a challenging period of recovery. Though their emotional wounds had yet to fully heal, through love and unity, they faced each day with resilience. Michael sat by the living room window, his gaze distant toward the horizon, as if searching for a better future for his children. He thought about everything they had gone through, about a society still rife with discrimination and prejudice that future generations would have to face. "Madison, Chloe," he called softly, "I know everything has deeply hurt you, but I believe from these hardships, you will grow stronger. Remember, your dignity and worth do not depend on the eyes of others." Madison smiled, tears streaming down her cheeks. "I will try not to let those things break me. I want to do something to help others not have to suffer like we did." Chloe nodded in agreement, her voice determined. "We must stand up, not only for ourselves, but for those who still have no voice." Michael felt proud of his children, while increasingly aware of his responsibility in the fight against discrimination and injustice. He decided to turn their painful experience into inspiration for social activism. He began participating in organizations that protect the rights of people of color, organizing talks and workshops to raise awareness about racial discrimination. Through social media, their family's story spread widely, creating waves of empathy and awakening in the community. Many shared their own stories, together forming a collective voice demanding justice and change. Michael knew that change could not come overnight, but each small step brought great hope. He advised his children to always keep their faith, be proud of their identity, and never let prejudice conquer them. Do not remain silent in the face of injustice. Speak out, take action. Only unity and awareness can defeat prejudice and bring about a truly equal society.